And we're back. Matt, this has been great so far. And I say so far because it's going to be even better going forward. It's been great, but now it'll be epic or something like that. It's always epic. Anyway, so I don't derail us anymore. Here was what we're going to do. We're going to jump into the expert focus segment. And this segment's all going to be about podcasting and for podcasters and some information to help all the podcasting community out and all of our viewers out. The tagline is personal service, saving podcasters time and energy, because we know podcasters spend a lot of time and energy in their doing their craft, so to speak. Give us a quick overview of what we're going to be talking about, and then I'll give the folks the 3 bullet points, and we'll dive right in.
Yeah, well, when we did our pre-chat, I guess I thought of the three keys to success what I would want to know if I was looking to start up a show. So the things I'd like to touch on, first of all, understanding how much work goes into producing your own podcast. Another key point that I see is the importance of being consistent. And then finally, the having quality, looking at quality, not just price, I suppose, and when you're looking at options on producing your show.
Epic. So you did that summary so well and gave the folks those 3 bullet points. We're going to go ahead and dive right into the first one, which it's all good, man. It's epic. Hey, it's good. You said you wanted your own show. You're just taking over my job. That's fine.
Yeah.
Not a problem. So let's dive right in. As far as how much work is involved, how much work is involved in doing and running and all the fun stuff around podcasting?
Okay, if someone's listening, if there's one thing you could take from this, if you think you're going to start up a weekly show and spend 2 hours a week or an hour a week on everything, I hate to burst someone's bubble, but it's probably not going to happen. There is a fair amount of work that goes in. Now there's a big reward too. You're putting out your message to the world, so that's where I'm trying to bridge that disconnect. But there's a lot of work that goes in. I know a lot of podcasters. I don't have my own show, but first of all, I mean, you're booking guests. Like, how are people coming to you? There's a time involvement in right there. You get the person on the phone at a mutually, I guess, a time that works for both of you, and then you're having your pre-chat like we did. You're going through the interview. You're having your post-chat. And it'd be nice if that's where it stopped, but no, that's really where the fun just starts, as you know, because what's going to happen is after you say you have a 30-minute show, what I'm usually recommend or I find is that 30 minutes of audio is going to take you about an hour and a half to edit really right. And when I say edit, that's going through the interview and taking out the pauses and the lip smacks and making sure the host and the guest volume, are similar, so you're not going to blow out the listener's eardrum and make it an enjoyable experience. There's things that come up during the course of an interview that are fun to take out: background noises, paper shuffling, dogs barking, sirens, all that fun things. So that adds up, and you're stopping to do your show notes while you're listening to the interview again if you're a host, and you have to write down your points because you're going to be promoting your show. So that could take an hour and a half. I try to warn people that part can be time consuming. Then you've got the body of the interview edited, then you've got to mix in your neat little intros and outros and transition sounds and bumpers and maybe you have sponsorship. You have to mix all that in to make sure that all fits together nicely. And then once you're done that, you're tagging or branding the file, you're shrinking down the MP3, and you're going into separate programs to do all this. So you may say, oh, okay, it only takes 5 minutes to tag a file, but or to do these things, but you add all these things up, they can be quite time-consuming, and that's before you even upload it to the hosting site.
Well, and I was going to interrupt for one quick second, Matt, because something you said really struck an interesting chord, because you talked about taking about an hour and a half. Now, for me, it sounds like it would take an experienced person an hour and a half to do all that, because you've got a half hour of audio. You pretty much have to listen to the whole thing anyway, so that's a minimum of a half hour. Then if you're typing and writing and doing all your show notes and everything, so it would seem to me that an experienced person, it would take an hour and a half, and it would seem to me that if somebody was only doing it once a week for only their own show, and I say only just to mean limited to, limited to their own show, it could take 2 or or 3 times as long. I mean, I know when I first started this, I remember how much extra time, when I first started doing video editing and all the other stuff this way, I know how much more time it took me than that
Yeah.
it does now. Now, isn't it fair to say that an inexperienced person or somebody who it's not their full-time job, it could take longer, 2, 3, or 4 times longer than an hour and a half for each
Yes.
half-hour podcast episode to get it right?
No, you're absolutely right. My time has been cut down just because I close my eyes at night. I see the editing software in my head because I'm doing it all day long, and you do get some that are a little bit harder to edit, and just because of for a number of reasons, and it depends too on the host and the guest. A lot of times, the host, and the guest, once your experience might be a little bit quicker. But you are right. There are some, that I've been definitely I've been a lot longer on. So you're absolutely right. No two shows are the same, and some might stretch a little bit longer. And I usually try to recommend a host if you can to in my opinion, keep a podcast, the quick and a little bit shorter, and don't venture into, just in my opinion, those hour and plus shows that they could tend to drag on.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting because and you mentioned the hour plus shows. Here, just as a quick digression, here's what I found is the time of the show goes up exponentially by the number of guests or the number of people talking. It seems like if you
Yeah,
keep
that's
it
true.
if you keep a show to one guest, you can probably get it done in about a half hour. I mean, look at the way we do Expert Showcase. I mean, we do experts focus, and we do Hero's Journey in one segment, expert focus in another. They're really their own two little mini. They could be their own two little mini podcasts because they have their own subject matter, and they work
Mhm.
well at a half hour with only one guest. But you look at something like SourceFed, who has 4 hosts on it. They fill an hour very, very quickly because they're all talking and everybody wants to talk and converse. So I guess the point there becomes, I think this also flows into understanding how much work to wrap it back in there. Would you agree that if you want to have, that your work is probably increased by the number of guests you plan to have on your podcast, either simultaneously or in a row on a given broadcast, or do you think that doesn't affect it at all?
No, I think you're right. You can't shortchange a guest. All the shows I work with, to be quite honest, are just a host and guest, or a host doing a little monologue or a solo show. So I haven't come across. I've listened to a few podcasts where they've had multiple guests in, and I think you want to give everyone a fair try. And I guess there's sometimes where a longer podcast works well is when you're driving in the car and you really have a subject that you're passionate about. If there's an hour and a half podcast, that's great because you're listening to it right straight out. So
Yeah.
it's just sometimes it could drag on and affect the listeners, I guess, attention span.
Epic. So before we get into the next bullet point, which is the importance of remaining consistent, is there anything else you want to leave our audience with today about understanding how much work is involved in doing a podcast?
Yeah, I think if you go in, expect how does that work? It's you expect the best but prepare for the worst. I think is kind of how it says, because a lot of podcasters are passionate people, but I mean this is also they're doing this on the side. They have a full-time job and they've got lots of kids, things like that on the weekends. So that can really affect. You don't want your passion project to be something that's tied around your leg and pulling you down that you're dreading and things like that. So I think that my advice is just be realistic on what it's going to do. If you want to put out, whether you're doing it yourself or outsourcing it, just be realistic that there are quite a few steps involved to put out a quality product, and yeah, know what's involved before committing to starting up.
Epic. And that kind of also leads us into the importance of remaining consistent because understanding what's involved is going to help you plan for consistency to make sure that you're consistent. And before I steal your thunder, because I just realized I was about to describe what this is about, why don't I turn it over to you
That's
because
good.
it is your show and you're the
No,
you're
no.
you're the important thing. So tell the folks why it's important to be consistent.
Well, I mean, there's, like I was saying, there's some people where podcast is strictly a hobby if you're really passionate about something, and that's fine. Those people, I have a lot of respect for them. A lot of podcasters are using it, whether if they're in the coaching industry or personal development, they're using it really as a live or a recorded business card. So it's very important when you're using that podcast as your business card and people are signing up to subscribe to your feeds and get delivered your content, to keep delivering. If it's a weekly show, if you're delivering them or releasing them on Monday, keep them up, because people, they'll get used to getting that. And I know there's a discussion, podcasts are evergreen and they stay online forever and that. But if this, in my opinion, is that once you build up that following, you lose a little bit of steam if you're releasing a show every 2 or 3 months. And I know it's hard because everybody's got stuff going on, but if you're going to be a weekly podcast, do your best to keep that weekly. And now there's things that you can do, and you're probably familiar with batching and being in the interview business. But the nice thing is with these programs, hosting sites and different things, if you can get a day where you can do 5, 6 interviews, say you do 6 interviews, you've got enough there. I guess I consider it, in the can. You have enough there to last you a month and a half. Get those, put them in the Dropbox for the editor, or set them aside for you to edit yourself, and get those all done up at once. So if you're going, say, on vacation, or you're going to have a busy time at maybe a day job, you know that's sitting there being set to be released from your, on the hosting site or on your website. So we have the technology now, so if you can focus and be consistent, you're not going to lose momentum on your brand. Because I read somewhere, I think there's, I don't know if anyone knows the exact number, there's somewhere around 250,000 podcasts, and I've read that up to 40% of them are actually dormant, they're inactive. And I think that goes back to, well, the point one, understanding how much work's involved. People start it, hey, this is fun, do 5 or 6 episodes maybe, and then don't monetize and say, wow, this is a lot of work, do I keep going? But then also, yeah, I mean, if 40% are inactive, that means there's an awful lot of podcasts that aren't being consistent, and people losing momentum.
Well, and that really becomes the key. So when you're saying consistency, it sounds like there's really two types of consistencies. I'm going to translate a little bit, at least what I picked up on. One type of consistency, because it's used as your business card, is consistency in your own message and you being consistent in the podcast, so that people hear the same thing over and over and over. I mean, you look at some radio DJs like Howard Stern. Once he got his format, he didn't deviate from his format while he was on the radio for umpteen years. It was always the shock jock. It was always, people knew what they were going to get. And it's funny, there's a scene in the movie Private Parts where they're looking at the ratings, and they're like, his ratings were up amongst people who liked him, and they said, why? And they said, well, they want to see what he's going to say next. And he said his ratings were up in the people who didn't like him. And then he said, why? And he said, because they want to see what he's going to say
Yeah,
next. So the whole point is he was consistent, and everybody kind of knew what they were going to get. The second
yeah.
and equally critical part of consistency you were bringing up is the consistency of show releasing, and making sure that if you commit to a weekly, you figure out a way to make it a weekly show. Just like Expert Showcase. Expert Showcase is released on a weekly basis, but we have seasons, so we'll take a break in between. Maybe the summer and the fall season, like other TV
That's
shows
smart.
do. But
Yeah,
then it's like, okay, fine. Here you go. Here's the next season. So is that
yeah,
what were those the two things you were talking
exactly.
about?
Yeah, if you're going to if you are busy, you're taking the summer off or something, maybe announce it, put out a blog post, let your network know, hey, we'll see you again in September. So you're not just leaving them hanging, wondering if you're still doing the podcast, if you stopped it, if that's a very good idea. But you're right, though. I think hosts a lot of times maybe need some time to recharge as well. So I think if you're smart about letting your people know you'll be back with new episodes October 1st, then I think that's the way to go about it.
So the other thing, and it's interesting because I do all the scheduling with Expert Showcase and other TV shows that we run, but I don't do a lot of scheduling with podcasts. So tell me, if is there a way that you can, if you have older episodes in the can, that you can make them fresh again, re-release them, like we do in TV, do a rerun, that sort of thing? I mean, is that a capability, um, or is it more manual where you're just downloading the episode and uploading it, and re-releasing it? And by the way, Matt, before you answer that, if you haven't had a client that's had to do it, it's okay to say it's okay to
Oh
say you
yeah.
haven't had a client that wants to do that.
Yeah, I've had actually I just had this week a client sent me some an episode and he said I can't even remember when we recorded this. I think I did it 2 3 months ago. So I guess the issue there is you've got to really listen if they're talking about something time sensitive. You know, if the U.S. election's gone by and they're making predictions on Trump being the next president, then I guess you got to kind of watch for that, or talking like a bit about events. But the nice part is a lot of this stuff is going right back to Napoleon Hill till today. It's all, now I don't want to use the word recycled, but it's all kind of, something that could help. Well, look, Gary Vaynerchuk's book was written almost 7 8 years ago, and it helped me just this year. So it's good if I encourage people not to, and I've mentioned this to a few people, if you have an interview from a few months ago, the quality is good, but it's, you're saying, oh gee, it's a few months old. Don't discount, like throw it in the trash. Maybe listen to it and see if it could still help someone, because that's content that you and your guests spent time to come up with. Don't waste it. That could keep you get you another podcast for another week. So yeah, that's a good question.
Thank you, and also in the vein of remaining consistent, consistently mention things and people in your podcast that are good for SEO, like Napoleon Hill, Trump.
Yeah.
I mean, you're epic, man. I got to get you. I mean, both you and Mark come on and give some great mentions for SEO, but that's a topic.
Toronto Blue Jays, got to give a shout out to our Canadian baseball team for sure. So
Hey, now wait a minute. I'm outside. I know you're in Canada. I'm outside Philadelphia. We still remember '93.
'93,
We're still
yeah.
kind of tweaking about '93, but that's okay. That's okay. If we were in
Mitch.
Colorado, we'd be happy. We'd be tweaking and we'd be happy. But anyway, that's besides the point completely. Let's. I think that's a natural segue, and at least I got a chance to take my breath for an hour, for my one breath an hour. Let's move into the importance of producing a quality product. That
Sure.
sounds so simple and so much like common sense. Um, but you'd be surprised at the people who don't do it. I'll tell you a quick funny story before I ask for what you really mean here. I had done something for a while that I thought was quality, and an app called Oddvisor reached out to me and said, "We want to give you a page." I'm on there with Seth Godin and Guy Kawasaki and Joel Comm and a lot of other big names. Now one of the world's top experts in the personal growth visionary field. Um, and I sent them the recording, and they basically told me it took them hours to try and clean it up, but they could never clean it up. And I'm like, well, I thought it was quality the whole entire time until I actually listened to it. And then the funny part is I actually started checking some settings and realized, oh, what I thought was quality wasn't quality. So, I mean, that's kind of one of my experiences. But so I guess one of the things I want the audience to understand before we even go into quality, and that's why I brought it up, was the fact that you might think you're producing a quality product, but until you have a professional look at it, you might not know if you're not producing a quality product. Right,
Yes.
Matt?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. I recommend to people, if they're editing themselves, after you finish editing or putting it together, your show, step away from the computer for a while, just clear your head, do whatever, come back, sit down, and don't have your close your eyes, put in your earbuds, and pretend you're a listener and listen to that episode as if, and don't look at the little editing software going across the screen. Just close your eyes and say, okay, if I was listening to this podcast, is it blowing my eardrums out? Is the host and guest consistent? Is the music mix right? Are the everything needs to be done. So I guess that goes whether you're doing it yourself or outsourcing it. Try to not just look at price, because I've run into a couple cases already where someone said, well, I'm not going to pay you this, but I found someone off a popular, and I don't want to run down freelancers because they're great and I've used them for certain tasks, but if someone online says that they can do a full edit of your episode for $5 and they can do a 30 minutes in 45 minutes, odds are that's probably, that's, I would say, not possible to do the best job possible in 45 minutes. So I think, and also looking to see if there's hidden charges, because I've had clients run into, okay, well, I got a basic edit for $10, but then I went to mix it, there's an extra $5, and to do show notes was an extra $5, to upload it was an extra $5, and so just kind of see what's involved. And again, I used some freelancing sites. It's a great development that's come along online, but just make sure that if you want to put out a quality product just to save $1 or $2, it's really not worth it in the long run.
Yeah, well, and so the first reason to put out, or the first thing is that people might not know that their product isn't of high quality. But why is it so important to produce the highest quality product possible? I mean, it's just a podcast. It's just, I'll say it's just a podcast, right? I mean, why is it so important to produce as high a quality product as possible?
Well, it's for the listener, really. Like, you want those listeners to subscribe to your feed and to listen to get what you're saying, to listen from the start to the finish. So the problem is if you're not normalizing the volume, or if you're not matching volumes, or making sure, that it's a pleasant listening experience, someone's not going to listen to it again. They're going to pull their earbuds out and say, this is a mess, and they're probably not going to recommend your podcast to somebody else. So I think it's just important to, like I say, look at it as if you're a listener, close your eyes, listen to it, without coming at it from a bias, and say, if I was a listener, would I enjoy this, and would I subscribe to it, and would I recommend it to my friends? So, and have your friends and family listen to it too, and have them be brutally honest. Say, hey, anything you noticed with that, could be volume, could be background. Now, not all background noise can be taken out. It's kind of sometimes the editor has to do or the person editing has to do the best they can with what they have, but just do the best, because you're putting all that work into your podcast. You want it to sound as good as possible.
And I think you really hit on the golden nugget there. A lot of times we think, especially we in the personal growth industry, think that if we just give people great information, great content, that they're always gonna recommend us. But there's a psychology behind why you recommend somebody. It's not only the quality of the content, but the experience that somebody enjoys. And if they enjoy a better experience while listening, they're more apt to refer you to their friends and family, right, Matt?
Exactly. No, you're absolutely right. You only get one chance to make a first impression. So if that person, if they're not a raving fan, they're not a member of your tribe, they're tuning into you for the first time, you want to knock it out of the park with them, and then they're going to not only check out your podcast, or most likely you're going to check out your page and your course offerings and the other things that you could do for them. So it's a circle. It comes full circle, and they're all connected.
Yeah, that is epic. And I was just thinking of something, but without derailing us anymore, before we wrap up the expert focus, I'm gonna give people your website in a second. I'm gonna tell them they need to get in touch with you, and they need to really do business with you, because they do, to make their shows more epic. Before I get to all that, is there anything last you want to leave with our viewers today about podcasting, about personal service,
Sure.
about all this stuff that we've talked about?
Yeah, a few things, Chris, and I should have mentioned it on the consistent thing when I touched on you don't want the podcast to be a chore and start to hate your passion. There's been some people I know that said, I want to jump in with a daily show and I'm going to knock the socks off everyone. I'd recommend start with the weekly show first, get your feet under you, see what's involved, and then, if you say, hey, okay, I'm really liking this, I'm getting good results, I'm getting lots of guests, then ramp it up to a daily show if you have the means to do that. So start that way instead of saying going gangbusters out the gate. Now, I'm saying this, my brother started with a 7-day show, but he's a different breed. He went from 7, then he thought it was a major downscale to go to 5 days a week. The guy's a machine, but for podcasting, I think you really have to just go. Well, I guess it goes back to the first point: understand what's involved, and definitely don't bite off more than you can chew. Kind of dip your toe in, get your feet under you, and you'll get better. I've said this before, your second interview will be better than your first, your third interview will be better than your second, and then before you know it, you're going to have 100 shows under your belt, and people are going to be coming to you to ask for help. So.
Epic. Well, Matt, you've been an epic guest today. I'm going to throw up your website, podassist.com, folks. If you've got a podcast, or if you're thinking about a podcast, you've got to reach out to Matt. And I say if you're thinking about it because you're going to want to get this guy in on the ground floor on what you're doing, because he's going to help save you the time. I mean, if you're going to have to spend a couple of bucks on something in your podcast, you got to spend it on Matt and his services at Podassist, because it's going to make you better. It's going to, in my opinion, it's going to accelerate your growth, and it's going to get you to where you want faster. It's going to reduce your stress and reduce your frustration. And one of the things I love about Matt is the hands-on service that, the hands-on personal service that he gives all his clients. I mean, it's what this guy loves to do. He loves to be in the personal growth and development industry, and he does an epic job. I've heard a lot of his work. It's amazing. It's amazing to hear the before and after when Matt gets his hands on a podcast episode. Once again, it's podassist.com. If like I said, if you got a podcast, reach out to Matt. Go there today. Set up an appointment. Set up a consultation. Just get in touch with the guy. Just do it. Whatever he tells you to do, just do it. Matt, can you help me? Yes, I can. Good. You got to help me. So you got to go out there today. Visit podassist.com. Make it a point to do it today. Make it a point to come back and enjoy the next episode of Expert Showcase. And until we meet again, make it an epic day.
To watch the rest of this epic episode now, click on the link below the video. Do it now, you'll be glad you did. Are you still here? What are you waiting for? Watch the rest of this epic episode now by clicking on the link below the video.